Folks, for inventors in my law firm and for other small businesses that I've worked with, it's extremely likely that the reason that you're going to need and want, and probably the whole purpose you even built the thing, is to get additional cash contributions. I can't imagine somebody putting no to this, but all right, won't necessarily force my opinion on you, but you have the option, and I would strongly recommend that everybody uh, uh, at least consider the option of putting yes for this specific question, because it's very important to structuring the operating agreement to allow new investors. And people tend to overlook that. So I'm really glad. Again, this software is really good at asking pretty close to just the right questions. I would always want it to be where new members can be admitted later. There's a lot of scope and background on how you should make the voting requirement. I'm not going to try to steer you in either direction. There's benefits and disadvantages to each. I'm going to go with I'm going to go with unanimous here, because we only have a 3-member company at this time. That could change. I'd like to put a yes here. These are things that I would want. I don't necessarily, there are so many other conditions here. This is really wide open. Um, these are important things that people tend to neglect. There's a lot more. These are some cautions. Let's hit save and continue, because it would take too long to explain these. If you're going to be having what you might call partners, or at least members in an LLC, you need to be careful about who you draw in with you and what debts and what baggage they have coming with them, because that could become the LLC's baggage. I like this question. It's hard to think of all the hypothetical ways this could go wrong, but I'm going to click yes, um, and just make you aware of the types of things that come up. Again, this software is so well designed. Notice how it didn't present this until I clicked the yes. In order to make this video easier to watch and to be less turgid and bogged down in detail, let's just advance and say this is a very good thing for you to know about and to discuss. It would take too long to explain every detail of it. Please, though, be aware that people's lives change, things happen, divorce, injury, some type of personal problem, firing from a job, have to leave the area. All kinds of things would happen where people have good intentions but have to walk away from some of their earlier obligations and withdraw. Perfectly legitimate reasons for doing so. This shows a little bit of a merger between an LLC and an INC. LLCs have the flexibility to only hold meetings as required, whereas um, an INC has a more rigid structure that certain amount of meetings have to occur. and I think it's quarterly for an INC. I'm not sure. I think it's more often than just once a year. I don't think that's enough. I think it's something more frequent than just once a year in an INC, but I'm not sure. And it may vary by different states. This is a really interesting section here. Again, this software is just outstanding by lawdepot.com. I have no affiliation with them, none whatsoever. They've never heard of me, and I only want to say this process of having to go through this and answer and think about these questions is really worthwhile. And I want my clients to know about it, and I want my clients to do it. But here is where I would say whatever document comes out of this, I have a little bit of a disagreement. I would have a third item here, not just equal votes by member and not by ownership share, but also by management authority. See, one thing is there can be passive investors or silent partners or silent members who, like a Mark Cuban on a Shark Tank, put in a pretty significant contribution, but they don't want to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the LLC. They can't. They're involved in so many other vast business empires that they would not in a million years want to be involved in member votes. But they did put in a lot of capital. That would be an example where their management authority would be very different from their equity contribution. So now we've got an issue where there are ways to divide how member votes will be, not based on just equity contribution slash ownership share, but also based on management authority. A person with a very small amount of equity can have a much higher disproportionate management slash ownership share if the members elect to do so and have that person run it and work for it full time. They may have a lot less equity, but a lot more management authority. You don't want to always think of management authority to be directly proportional to ownership. They're not. And this particular checkbox, I'm glad it's here, but there should be a third one and maybe even a fourth one. But it would take too long to explain. We got to advance this video. In general, I'm in favor of having one or more appointed managers. But one of the things you folks should be thinking about, wait a minute, what's manage? Can they bind the company contractually without checking with the other members? Can they make withdrawals of over $10,000 from the bank account without checking with other members? There's all kinds of questions involved in it. Let's see. Yeah, see, it didn't give really a good, very good definition of the word manage. I'm not sure, but I think some of that's going to come up later in this questioning software. Can't remember. But my thought would be for my clients, you probably want to have an appointed manager because a lot of this is the day-to-day operations of the company, not necessarily withdrawing large amounts of money, not necessarily going into contractually binding arrangements and relationships, but other kinds of things regarding, for example, being able to answer the phone. People who have a full-time job sometimes can't pick up the phone and talk about their side gig or side hustle or side hobby or side business during day-to-day while they are at their main gig. They can get in a lot of trouble for that. So you need to manage the company. Somebody's got to pick up the phone when people call. Somebody has to answer if you have a website with chat mode. Somebody's got to respond quickly, and someone has to respond to the emails as they come in. I'm going to go with majority here just because to save time. I'm going to put Bob Smith for the manager. We had to pick somebody. I don't know necessarily why I picked him. He is the guy who holds the patents. Oh, this would take so long. If this comes up later and I preempted the software, so be it. I could not begin to start describing the duties and responsibilities. I made a couple of remarks about it before. Again, this term ordinary and necessary is heavily litigated. Let's just put these as things to think about. This will probably have to be the subject of a whole separate YouTube video, maybe even a separate playlist. This is so hard to briefly explain. And this one also is a tough one to briefly explain, but I'm going to stick with partnership, and I'm not going to do the fiscal year. Might have even been better off skipping that altogether. I would rather skip this one. The last time I used the software, this wasn't in here. Again, as stated before, the key word here is the loss and the losses. How will they be allocated? The whole purpose is to generate a profit, but that does not always happen. And the most interesting lawsuits and civil litigation don't come up when the company's doing well. They come up when things are falling apart. So allocating losses is an interesting aspect here. First of all, we would want the losses to be in the name of the LLC, and so that they would not necessarily be attributable to the specific individual members. But I wish there was an option 4 here, as designated herein, where we would lay out some kind of grid or chart or something in which it doesn't correspond to any of the 3 options given. Not an equal share, not a fixed percentage, and not in proportion to capital contributions. This doesn't discuss sweat equity. What if the sweat equity and the patents turn out to be a lot more important than the capital? There's a lot of reasons why I wish they would have put a 4th button here with some kind of text input box as indicated in the following chart. But they don't have that. This is going to print out a Microsoft Word or ASCII text document that you can add things to later. And this will be one where you should be thinking about adding it to it. Because the inventors, their contribution is different necessarily than just the amount of capital contribution. The intellectual property contribution, intangible as it is often worth nothing, or is often worth 10 times more than all the capital contribution combined. You never know. It's really difficult to evaluate that at the beginning. And the best thing that I would suggest is don't try. Boy, is this a complicated issue to explain, though. All right, this next one is so difficult that we're going to have to stop it and start it again.
Thanks for watching. Let me know any other topics you want me to discuss. This YouTube channel is to help you. This is for information. I want to hear from you, and I want to know what things are on your mind.